There are prayers that rise like smoke into heaven, quiet, desperate, unnoticed by the world. And then there are prayers so powerful they tear through the veil between the living and the dead, witnessed by saints themselves. This is the story of Maria Castellano, a mother who lost everything in a single night, and the impossible moment when Padre Pio himself saw her soul, stripped bare, drowning in grief, offering one Hail Mary that would change not just her life, but the lives of two children the world had forgotten. What happened in that Italian monastery in 1958 defies logic. What Maria discovered about her children defies belief. And what Padre Pio revealed to her would send shockwaves through the Vatican itself. If you believe in the power of prayer, in miracles that science cannot explain, hit that subscribe button. Because this story will shake everything you thought you knew about faith, loss, and the invisible world that watches over us all. Now, let me take you back to where it began. Not in a church, but in ashes. Maria Castellano had been a mother for exactly 7 years and 4 months when she stopped being one. It happened on a October night in 1956 in the small village of Pietrelcina, southern Italy, the same village where Padre Pio had been born 69 years earlier. Maria's husband, Giuseppe, had taken their 2 children, Luca, age 7, and Sofia, age 5, to visit his brother's farm 15 kilometers away. A routine trip. They'd done it 100 times. Maria stayed home with a migraine, pressing cold cloths to her forehead, listening to the radio hum static and old hymns. She remembered thinking how quiet the house felt without the children's laughter. She remembered praying they'd return safely. She didn't know that, at that exact moment, Giuseppe's truck was skidding on rain-slicked mountain roads. She didn't hear the crash. She didn't hear her children's final screams as the vehicle plunged 300 feet into a ravine, exploding on impact. When the police came to her door at midnight, Maria collapsed before they finished speaking. The funerals were held in a fog. 2 small white caskets. The whole village attended, their faces blurred and distant, their condolences like stones dropping into a well Maria could no longer climb out of. Giuseppe's brother survived with burns covering 40% of his body, but Giuseppe, Luca, and Sofia were gone. Burned beyond recognition, identified only by dental records and Giuseppe's wedding ring. Maria stopped eating, stopped speaking. She sat in the children's bedroom for days, holding Sofia's doll, running her fingers over Luca's toy soldiers. The house became a mausoleum. Neighbors brought food she never touched. The priest came weekly, offering prayers she didn't hear. Then, 3 months after the accident, something inside Maria snapped. It wasn't grief anymore. It was fury. A volcanic rage at God, at fate, at the universe that had ripped her children away. She screamed at the crucifix on her wall until her voice gave out. She tore down every religious image in the house. She would have burned the Bible if her hands hadn't been shaking so violently. But that night, January 19th, 1957, Maria had a dream. She saw Sofia standing in a field of wildflowers, her small hand reaching out. Behind her, Luca was calling something Maria couldn't quite hear. They weren't burned. They were whole, luminous, and they were pointing towards something in the distance, a monastery with bell towers piercing a blood-red sky. When Maria woke, she found something impossible on her nightstand. A letter she had never written, in handwriting she had never seen, with only 5 words scrawled across it. Come to San Giovanni Rotondo. Maria held that letter for 3 days, turning it over in her trembling hands, searching for answers that didn't exist. The paper was expensive, heavy, cream-colored, with a watermark she couldn't identify. The handwriting was elegant, almost clerical, written in fountain pen ink that hadn't smudged despite appearing on her nightstand in the middle of the night. She lived alone. Her doors were locked. The windows sealed against the January cold. No one could have entered her house. She showed it to Father De Luca, the village priest who had buried her children. He examined it under lamplight, his weathered face creasing with concern. San Giovanni Rotondo, he whispered. That's where Padre Pio lives. Who? A Capuchin friar, a mystic. They say he bears the stigmata, the wounds of Christ on his hands and feet. Thousands travel to see him, Maria, to confess, to be healed. Father De Luca's eyes darkened. But also, they say he sees things beyond this world. Maria felt something cold crawl up her spine. I don't believe in miracles anymore. Then why are you showing me this letter? She had no answer. The next morning, Maria packed a small bag. She withdrew what little money Giuseppe had left in their savings, enough for a train ticket and a week's lodging. She told no one where she was going. As she locked the door to the house where her children had laughed and played, she felt like she was sealing a tomb. The train journey took 11 hours, winding through the Apennine Mountains, past villages still rebuilding from the war. Maria sat by the window, watching Italy scroll past like a film strip of someone else's life. Other passengers chattered about harvests and politics. She said nothing. The letter burned in her coat pocket like a living thing. She arrived in San Giovanni Rotondo at dusk. The monastery of Santa Maria delle Grazie rose from the hillside like a fortress, its stone walls golden in the dying light. Pilgrims crowded the streets, hundreds of them, some on crutches, some carrying sick children, all moving toward the monastery with desperate hope etched into their faces. Maria joined the river of the faithful, though she felt like a fraud among them. They believed. She was hollowed out, a shell moving on momentum alone. She found a small boarding house run by an elderly woman named Signora Russo, who crossed herself when Maria mentioned Padre Pio's name. You're here for confession? I don't know what I'm here for. Signora Russo smiled sadly. He'll know. He always knows. That night, Maria lay in an unfamiliar bed, clutching her rosary for the first time since the accident. And then she heard it. A child's laughter, coming from the empty hallway outside her door. Maria bolted upright, heart hammering against her ribs. The laughter came again. High, musical, unmistakably Sophia's. That same giggle she'd made when Giuseppe tickled her feet. Maria threw off the blankets and stumbled to the door, yanking it open so hard the hinges groaned. The hallway was empty. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting dancing shadows against peeling wallpaper. The laughter had vanished, replaced by the sound of wind rattling the windows. Sophia? Maria's voice cracked. Luca? Silence. She stood there for what felt like hours, her bare feet growing numb on the cold tile floor. Finally, she retreated into her room and locked the door, pressing her back against it, breathing hard. Grief hallucinations. That's what the doctor had called them. The mind playing tricks, trying to conjure what it had lost. But it had felt so real. Morning came with church bells that shook the entire village. Maria dressed in her only black dress and joined the crowd flowing toward the monastery. She learned that Padre Pio heard confessions at dawn, and that people waited for days, sometimes weeks, for a single moment with him. She didn't have weeks. Maria pushed through the crowd, ignoring the angry protests, driven by something she couldn't name. She reached the church doors just as a young monk was closing them. "Please," she gasped, "I need to see Padre Pio." The monk's eyes were kind but firm. "Everyone needs to see him, Signora. You must wait your turn." "My children," the words caught in her throat. "My children are dead." Many here have lost loved ones. Padre Pio sees the pain in all who come. Maria was about to plead further when a voice echoed from inside the church, deep, resonant, speaking in dialect. "Let her through." The young monk's face went pale. He stepped aside without another word. Maria entered the dimness of Santa Maria delle Grazie. Votive candles flickered like captured stars. The air smelled of incense and old stone and something else, something that reminded her of the wild flowers from her dream. Ahead, in the confessional booth, she could see a silhouette through the carved wooden screen. She approached slowly, her footsteps echoing in the vast silence. When she knelt, her knees cracking against the prayer bench, she finally saw him. Padre Pio's face was weathered, framed by a gray beard, but his eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to look not at her, but through her, into every secret chamber of her soul. Before she could speak, before she could even draw breath, he said 3 words that shattered her world. "Your children live." Maria's breath stopped. The world tilted. "What did you say?" Padre Pio's stigmata-marked hands remained folded in prayer, blood seeping through the fingerless gloves he wore during Mass. His voice was gentle, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. "I see them, Maria. I have seen them since the moment you entered San Giovanni Rotondo." "That's impossible. They died. I buried them." "You buried bodies." He leaned closer to the screen, and Maria could see tears glistening in his ancient eyes. "But their souls are not at rest." The church suddenly felt airless. Maria gripped the edge of the confessional, her knuckles white. Are they in purgatory? Are they suffering?" "No, my child. They are here, on this earth, still bound to this world." Maria's mind reeled. Every prayer she'd learned as a girl, every theological lesson, told her this was impossible. The dead moved on. Heaven, hell, purgatory. Those were the only destinations. Souls didn't linger. They didn't remain earthbound. "I don't understand." Padre Pio was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a sorrow so profound it seemed to age him before her eyes. "There are things the Church does not speak of openly, Maria. Souls that cannot cross over because their deaths were unfinished, interrupted." Wrong. Wrong? What does that mean? The accident that took your husband and children. It was no accident. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. What are you saying? I have seen it in my visions. I have watched your grief like a film projected onto my very soul. The crash was arranged. The brake lines were cut. Someone wanted Giuseppe dead, and your children died because they were with him. Maria couldn't breathe. The church walls seemed to close in around her. Who? Who would do this? Giuseppe worked for the municipality, yes? Handling land contracts, development permits? Yes, but he discovered something. Documents proving that officials were selling public land to private developers for bribes. He was going to expose them. Padre Pio's voice hardened. They silenced him, and your innocence paid the price. Maria's entire body was shaking now. Rage and grief and disbelief crashed over her in waves. If this is true, why didn't the police investigate? Why didn't anyone? Because the men who ordered it control the police, the mayor, the courts. They buried the truth along with your family. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Maria whispered, What do I do? Padre Pio reached through the screen and took her hand. His touch was warm despite the blood on his gloves. You pray, Maria, one Hail Mary, and you let me show you what I see. Maria closed her eyes as Padre Pio instructed, his bloodied hand still holding hers through the confessional screen. Say the words, Maria, with every ounce of your being, not as ritual, but as a cry from the depths of your soul. She began. Hail Mary, full of grace. Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. Something shifted in the air. The temperature dropped. The candle flames bent sideways, though there was no wind. And blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. And then Maria saw them. It happened all at once. The church walls dissolved, replaced by a vision so vivid it felt more real than reality itself. She was standing in the ravine where the truck had crashed, but instead of wreckage, she saw two small figures, Luca and Sophia. They were translucent, luminous, caught between worlds. They were reaching for her, their mouths moving but no sound emerging. Behind them stood three men in dark suits, shadows without faces. One held a ledger, another held what looked like Giuseppe's briefcase, the one he'd carried that night. The third was watching the children with cold, predatory eyes. They've been trying to reach you, Padre Pio's voice echoed through the vision. But their souls are trapped by the weight of injustice, by the lies that buried them, by the truth that was never spoken. Holy Mary, Mother of God. Maria's voice grew stronger. The shadowy men turned toward her now, as if sensing her presence in this in-between place. One of them stepped forward, and Maria gasped as his face materialized. She recognized him. Mayor Lombardi, the man who had spoken at Giuseppe's funeral, the man who had held her hand and promised justice. He was the one who had ordered her husband's murder. Pray for us sinners. The vision intensified. Maria saw documents burning in an oil drum behind the mayor's office. She saw Giuseppe's briefcase being thrown into the Fortore River. She saw the mechanic who had cut the brake lines, a man named Tommaso Greco, being paid in a dark alley. And she saw something else. The children's souls, bound to these men, following them, witnessing, waiting. Now, and at the hour of our death. They cannot rest until the truth is revealed, Padre Pio said. Until justice is served. Your children are not haunting you, Maria. They are begging you to be their voice. Amen. The vision shattered like glass. Maria opened her eyes, gasping, tears streaming down her face. Padre Pio was watching her with infinite compassion. Now you know what you must do. Maria stood, her legs shaking, but her resolve hardening like steel. I'm going to destroy them. Maria left San Giovanni Rotondo with something she hadn't possessed in 15 months. Purpose. Padre Pio had given her more than a vision. He'd given her names, locations, details that only divine intervention could have revealed. He told her where Giuseppe's briefcase had been hidden, not in the river as she'd seen, but retrieved by a fisherman who'd found it weeks later, terrified to come forward. He told her that Tommaso Greco, the mechanic, was drowning in guilt, drinking himself to death in a tavern in Foggia. And he told her that Mayor Lombardi was planning to run for regional office, building his campaign on the sympathy he'd garnered as the man who supported a grieving widow. But Padre Pio had also warned her, justice will come, Maria, but not through vengeance, through truth, through light, and through one more prayer. Maria returned to Pietrelcina like an avenging angel. She found the fisherman first, an old man named Bruno, who wept when she knocked on his door. I was afraid, he confessed. Afraid they'd kill me too. He gave her the briefcase. Inside, Giuseppe's documents remained intact. Contracts, bribe receipts, bank statements showing payments from development companies directly to Mayor Lombardi and 2 council members. Everything Giuseppe had died to expose. Next, she confronted Tommaso Greco in that squalid tavern. He was a shell of a man, hollowed out by remorse. When Maria sat across from him, he took one look at her face and broke. I didn't know there were children in the truck, he sobbed. They said it would look like an accident. They paid me 200,000 lire. I've seen their faces every night since. Then help me, Maria said quietly. Testify. Give them back their voices. He nodded, hands shaking around his glass. The final confrontation happened on February 2nd, 1957, exactly 1 year after Giuseppe's funeral. Maria walked into the mayor's office during a council meeting, flanked by Father De Luca and a journalist from Rome whom Padre Pio had mysteriously contacted. She placed the briefcase on the conference table. My husband died because of what's inside this, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. My children burned alive because you couldn't let the truth come out. Mayor Lombardi's face drained of color. Signora Castellano, your grief has made you delusional. Tommaso Greco has confessed. Bruno Salvatore has the evidence. And this journalist has already filed his story with 3 national newspapers. Maria stepped closer, and in that moment, every person in the room saw not a broken widow, but a force of nature. You murdered my family, and I am going to watch you pay for it. The room erupted. Council members shouted. The mayor lunged for the briefcase. But the journalist's camera was already flashing, capturing everything. That night, as police arrested Mayor Lombardi and 2 accomplices, Maria returned to her children's bedroom. She knelt beside Sophia's bed, took out her rosary, and prayed one final Hail Mary. And as she spoke the words, she felt them, two small hands touching her shoulders, a warmth that defied explanation. And she heard, clear as bells, Sophia's voice. "Thank you, Mama." When Maria opened her eyes, the room was empty. But on Sophia's pillow lay a single wildflower, the same kind from her dream. And Maria knew, with a certainty that transcended faith or logic, that her children were finally free. Padre Pio passed away in 1968, but his final letter to Maria remained in her possession until her own death in 1989. It contained only one line: "The prayers of mothers move mountains. Never forget what one Hail Mary can do." If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of prayer and the unstoppable love of a mother, leave a comment sharing your own experience with faith in the darkest moments. Subscribe to hear more true stories that prove miracles still happen. Because some prayers don't just reach heaven, they change the world. This is Maria's legacy. This is what one Hail Mary can do.